Good afternoon. You're listening to the Going Home portion of the new WCEG Network, Issues and Answers. I'm Norman A. Carter Jr. We're on the WCEG Network. You can access us at WCEGTalkRadio.com. Then click the live stream tab so you can see my handsome face, or you can watch us on your smart TV via YouTube. Just key in WCEG Network and you can see us, you can view us. We're live. And I'll be your host for the next 30 minutes to however long on the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group Network, where we speak life into the community. You can like us on Facebook. We're there. Follow us on Twitter. We're there. And on Instagram at WCEG Talk Radio. That's WCEG_Talk_Radio and at WCEG Network. Listeners, please feel free to call in or Skype at 1-678-619-1402. That's 1-678-619-1402. Ask your questions, make your comments, voice your concerns. Let us hear from you. Just a reminder that the topics and opinions of Norman A. Carter Jr. are mine alone, and they do not necessarily reflect the WCEG Network. I'm standing here taking responsibility for every little thing that I say. I thank you for your continued support of the WCEG Network. Thank you. Don't forget to call in with your questions or concerns. 678-619-1402. I'd like to go back a little bit when I was talking about the blue code or the blue wall of silence and the mortar that holds that together, and examples of what can happen when police officers speak up. And I mentioned a lot about Philadelphia because that's where I'm from. That's the bulk of my experience. But as I have found out after my appearance on a nationally televised news magazine program, that the concerns that I witnessed and experienced in Philadelphia are concerns that are happening throughout this country. Now, in Philadelphia last year, a lot of things happened. I've been retired for several years, but I have a pipeline contacts within the Philadelphia Police Department who constantly give me information. I read the Philadelphia newspapers almost daily. And this happened with the Narcotics Field Unit. And that's very close to me because during my last 2 years on the Philadelphia Police Department, I was a supervisor in the Narcotics Field Unit. And what happened last year, there was a meeting of the entire unit that was called together. And the commanders of that unit were interested in increasing the numbers of arrests for narcotics violations. And what they did was they gave the specific instructions for the police officers to go out into the minority communities in Philadelphia. Those are African Americans, those are Latino Americans, Asian Americans, and arrest suspected drug violators, whether they had drugs on them or not, but to bring them in custody. And anytime a police officer restricts your movement, that is technically an arrest. And what these officers were instructed to do was to basically shake these people down for information. And what that meant was to force these people to either They were either going to be arrested for drug violations, or they were being forced to become informants and notify and give police information on drug suppliers and drug dealers in their area. And if these people weren't forthcoming with information, there would be other actions by the police department taking against them to impinge on their freedom. And fortunately, what happened is a group of African American police officers took their concerns to the Guardian Civic League of Philadelphia, which is an organization of predominantly African American police officers, and also went to obtain legal representation and informed that the lawyers that they were forced to go out into the communities, minority communities, and harass people and force them to become informants under the threat of future arrest. As a result, there was a lawsuit that I believe is currently enforced. And we do have our first caller, I do believe. This is Norman Carter on the WCEG Talk Radio Network. Listener, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing marvelously. I'm glad you called. How can I help you?
Okay, I have a question. Well, 3 questions about search warrants.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, are officers to use the actual evidence that they've identified to be associated with the crime, or should they also include what usually goes with what they perceive to be as a crime? For example, if I have 3 wheels, does it say I also stole the car too, and the car is also listed?
Okay, I'm not following too closely. Can you come back with that last part of the question again?
It was an example, like if I have 3 wheels or 3 tires, can an officer also say I stole the car?
You mean stole the car that those tires may have come from?
Say that one more time.
Are you saying, could they charge you with stealing a car that those tires may have come from?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
And you're saying that you had 3 tires in a car. How would they be able to prove, or what was the? Why would they say that? Why would they assume that those tires were stolen?
Okay, and that was a question that I had about search warrants, if they had to document actual evidence in order to search it.
Okay.
And my next question would be, is there any recourse for citizens to take when they know that an officer has beefed up the warrant in order to justify the search?
Okay, I can help you out with that. First of all, let's go back to the first part of your questions about evidence recovered during a search warrant.
Okay.
Let's say the search warrant has them looking for, let's say, we'll go with tires. Okay?
Okay.
And the search warrant states that stolen tires are in your house. Car tires.
Okay.
Okay. If they're coming into your house looking for stolen car tires, they can't look in your drawers. They can't look under your TV set. They have to go where there obviously would have been tires placed and put. That's the limitations. Now, if they're going in your house looking for drugs, they can look in places where you might hide drugs or anything. Now, let's say they're coming into your house on a search warrant and they're looking for drugs. This was my experience. And they find a stolen gun or a gun that does not belong to you. They can confiscate that gun, and either you would have to show proof. Now, if they know that it's stolen, they can charge you with receiving stolen property, not necessarily stealing the gun, because at that point there's no evidence that you actually took the gun. You're just in possession of it. So they couldn't charge you with stealing it, but they can charge you with receiving stolen property, which is a lesser charge. And that's, some of this is called in the legal profession as fruits from the poison tree. So if they're coming into your house and they're searching for drugs, but they find illegal guns, then those, or guns where there's questionable ownership, they can seize those guns. They can seize that property. I hope that sort of answers that part of your question. Now,
yes, it does.
Okay, now let's go back to having a beefed up search warrant. And I understand what you mean by saying that that they have a search warrant that has bogus information in it. For that, I would caution you that you would probably need to have a lawyer, and that is something that has to be worked out in court through what they call a suppression hearing. And at the suppression hearing, this will come after your preliminary hearing, but it'll come just before the trial. And what happens at that suppression hearing is the lawyer will get into the validity of the search warrant, and they can question how the officer got the information for the search warrant. They can get into the timeliness of the information that the officer received in furtherance of serving the search warrant on you. They can get into the validity or the truthfulness of the informant, or how the officer got the information that resulted in that warrant being taken out. And again, let's say they're coming in, they're looking for stolen tires, and they go through your drawers and they find a gun. That can be suppressed because there's no way that you could hide the tires in a dresser drawer. So that type of thing can be suppressed. But again, that has to be worked out at a suppression hearing by a lawyer. Very important. And in almost every case that a search warrant is issued, your lawyers will request a suppression hearing before the judge to challenge the veracity of that search warrant. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I thank you for calling the WCEG Network and Norman Carter, one of our first callers. And I encourage all of you to call with any question you have about, such as we just had, about search warrants or arrest, car stops, or how do you go about reporting bad behavior on police. And I also would encourage you that if you have good comments about police officers, I encourage you to make those comments to police commanders in your police division. That's very important, because you don't want to be known as a person who's just looking out for dirt. You want to be because what you want, and this is to go back to something I said earlier, to support good cops and good behavior by your police departments. And part of doing that is to notify police commanders, police commissioners, your politicians about good behavior and good deeds done by police officers in your community. And I was mentioning about the narcotics field unit in Philadelphia, how they successfully entered into a lawsuit that is now being, I believe it's still being acted upon, about being forced to harass citizens in the community just to increase the number of arrests in particular communities. That's illegal. That's not only illegal, it's immoral, and we were fortunate in that instance to have good cops joining together to stop an activity that was detrimental to every citizen in that community. Very, very important, which flows into whistleblowers. Again, another attack on that blue wall of silence, that code, that blue code that many of us fear. Before I get into that, and I'm going to tell you how serious this blue wall of silence, this blue code can be. I have a very good friend of mine who is now a retired police officer. He was forced to take a mental disability retirement. He is the first police officer I know, not only in Philadelphia, but perhaps in this country, who justifiably took a mental disability retirement, medical retirement, and that was caused by harassment from the Philadelphia Police Department. And why was he harassed? Some of you know about or heard about some call them revolutionary group called MOVE in Philadelphia. And there were several really bad incidents that happened with this group. But the incident I want to speak about was the probably infamous incident where in order to consummate an arrest of people in a particular house in a particular neighborhood, the Philadelphia Police Department burned down an entire neighborhood by dropping a bomb on a house in a residential community. And this particular police officer I'm speaking of, I won't use his name because I haven't talked to him lately today, and he may not want me to use his name in this format. But there was a young 10-year-old boy who, in the dead of night, while the house he was in was burning down, while in the midst of gunfire being exchanged between police officers and the people in that MOVE house, this young boy, 10-year-old boy, tried to flee the house amid gunfire. And this particular police officer left his position of cover and went into a dark alley amid gunfire and flames and rescued this 10-year-old boy. As a result of saving the life of this 10-year-old boy, this police officer was vilified because there was a lot of hatred from the police department directed at this particular group. Some of it's justified, some of it's not. But a police officer in the performance of his duty is never, ever supposed to be driven by hatred. Your main purpose is to enforce the laws of that community. It is not to exact vengeance. That is not the purpose of policing. And what happened is this officer was called, had people write on his locker, "in lover." And I'm sure you know what that means, on his locker. There was other things. He wasn't talked to, he was spoken to, he was ignored. He was harassed in other ways. And the harassment was so intense, and he received no support from either his co-workers or his supervisors or the mayor of the city or anyone in authority. And as a result of that mental duress for doing his job, he had a nervous breakdown, for want of a better description of what happened to him. And he had to be placed in an institution a mental institution for several weeks for counseling and for help. Even now to this day, he suffers from what I would call, or what we commonly call, post-traumatic syndrome disability. He suffers from that as a result of nothing but the peer pressure and the harassment and the danger that he put himself in rescuing that young male. And that's how intense that this peer pressure can be. Now, I'd like to move from that to some comments about civilians. Now, I know there has to be a lot of interest in this. How do you report instances of police abuse of authority or misconduct? And these are very important. And I can have experience with this because actually, as a private citizen, I, at one point, unfortunately, was in the position where I had to report misconduct by and threats by a police officer. And again, you can read about it in my autobiography, The Long Blue Walk, My Journey as a Philly Cop. You can look it up, read it, stories in there. But as a result of that experience, let me give you some steps to take if you embark on filing a complaint against a police officer for abusive conduct. And even some of my police officers who are listening who may be harassed, or my whistleblowers, some of these steps you can take also. Number one, keep a copy of any original documentation you may have. This includes video and voice recordings. I want to emphasize, keep an original copy of video and voice recordings. Now, in the incident that I was a part of, where I reported as a civilian, I had video and recorded evidence. And when I made my complaint to the Police Internal Affairs Unit, I took with me a copy of the recorded evidence that I had. When I came back 2 weeks later to be interviewed by a police lieutenant of the Philadelphia Internal Affairs Bureau, that lieutenant did not have a copy of that recording. What had happened was that the police corporal, whom I knew, destroyed or did away with that copy, that recorded copy of my complaint. So it's important. Any documentation that you have like that, video or recorded evidence, you give them a copy. If they want to listen to the original, never take the original, allow the original to be taken out of your possession. Now, when you make a complaint to the Police Internal Affairs Bureau, and every city, every state has some form of it, a Police Internal Affairs Bureau, they may request that you speak with the field supervisor first. That's a supervisor that's generally on the street, could be a corporal, sergeant, lieutenant, maybe even a captain in some cases. I caution you, if at all possible, never be interviewed alone. Have a trusted friend with you, if at all possible. In my particular instance, the police sergeant who came to my house to take my initial complaint was a friend of the police officer that I was making the complaint about. And I was not aware of that at the time. And what eventually happened is he was less than helpful. In fact, I truly suspect that after this complaint, after I filed my initial complaint with him, he contacted the person that I was making the complaint about and informed them, which led to another incident down the road that was not pleasant. If required to be interviewed by the internal affairs official, once again, try not to go alone. Try not to go alone. Take a trusted friend, or in serious cases, take a lawyer. Now, I want to add a little something I thought about. That when you're on my way here to the station, know that whenever you file a complaint against a police officer, whether in person or written, one of the first things they will do is check out your see if you have a criminal record. That's what they'll do. Because at this point, it's all about intimidating you. It can be about intimidating you. Never be intimidated by that. As long as you're not wanted. Never be intimidated by that. Just know that going into it, that while you're sitting there talking to an interviewer, they're investigating you at that moment also. That's part of their check to see if you are a truthful citizen. And your criminal record really has nothing to do with that. But this is what they will do, and that's what they do to intimidate you, to shake you up so much, and to get you off your truthful game. Do not be intimidated by that. Now here is something that sounds silly, but it's important. Be sure you have not consumed alcohol or taken any illegal drugs before you are interviewed. Some of you may laugh at that. It happens. You know, people, I need to have a little something so I can have my courage and get my nerves together. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's the first step to getting your complaint thrown out. No matter how true it might be, they will use that against you. Now, once you go to the Internal Affairs Unit, very important, take a pen or a pencil and a pad with you. Write down the name and rank of everyone with whom you speak. This includes the person at the desk and the interviewers. Very important. On your pad, note the date and time the interview began and the date and time it ends. Very important. Also, get a case number and get an incident report number. That's easy. You can ask for that right then and there. They are obligated to give you that information. That's very important to get and to obtain and safeguard that information, because this is your way of tracking your complaint. Some of these complaints, particularly I know this in Philadelphia, and this may have changed, that the internal affairs report does not become a public document, or a document that you can go and get a copy of. At least during my career, that was not possible. There's a reason for that. That's self-protection. They will tell you that this is a way of privacy concerns of the police officer. Trust me, it's a way to give them an out, a way to cover up lots of things. Be sure to get the contact information of the person who interviews you. That's a phone number. They probably won't give you an email address, but get a phone number. That's a good phone number, a good working number, a number at work that you can get in touch with your interviewer. Demand it. Get it. Also, you need to ask for a suspense date for the investigation. When will they get back to you to give you information about the progress of that investigation about your complaint? If you do not receive a response by that suspense date, call the interviewer. Be a pain in the tush. Call them up. If they do not respond, this happened to me, ask to speak with the supervisor. Never, ever settle for silence or delay. Never, ever settle for silence or delay. If he or she does not respond, you need to go the next step up. Even if you have to go to the mayor, This is what you need to do. Because I had an incident where when I filed my complaint, what I found out later on, they purposely delayed my complaint for almost 5 months after I made the initial complaint. What I did not know at the time is that there is I'm going to say, I can't remember exactly right now, but it could be 3.5 or 4 months, however it is, that if you want to take further action on that complaint, that action has to be taken before a certain date. I didn't know that at the time, so they purposely delayed my investigation until a time where I was not able to take further steps, at least within that particular system. So don't settle for a delay. That is a tactic to discourage and later invalidate your complaint. Keep that in mind. And a lot of times when you get legal representation to accompany you when you make this complaint, your lawyers or your legal representative will know about that. That could be a lawyer, could be a paralegal, but they know the procedures and the time limitations on complaints. And that's why I say it's very important that you get advice from someone about that complaint. And here is something important, and I mentioned this in the last segment. When you make your complaint, never ever lie or exaggerate. If you are not sure about a particular question or how to answer a question, say that you're not sure. Be honest. Be as specific as you can. Do not be intimidated by the tone or the body language of the interviewer. And while you're going through this, no matter what they say, no matter what they do not allow yourself to become angry. Because those type of emotional responses where you're just blurting out things, and I've always say that the spoken word can never be taken back. Keep that in mind. And you may say things that in an emotional response that may be looked at as disparaging your character, or looked at as maybe can be used against your perception of trustworthiness. So stay away from emotional responses. Never get angry. These are some important steps for both police officers and especially citizens whenever you are filing a complaint for abuse of authority. And I hope that many of you have taken notes on this. I'll remind you that those of you who are listening to the program or have friends that you think might be interested, that immediately after this particular segment ends, this program is available on YouTube by going to YouTube, WCEG Network, and just scroll on down because you'll see a lot of our programs, and just look for Norman A. Carter Jr. host and the date, which is today, March 9th, 2020. So I hope this has been informative. We did receive a very, very good call, and I hope that even though we didn't receive a lot of calls, that I was able to touch on things that some of the concerns that you may have concerning voting, concerning the census, concerning police misbehavior or good behavior. Those things are important. These are the type of subjects that we try to attack or present to you each and every time on the Issues and Answers program, especially when it's hosted by me, Norman A. Carter Jr. And I always have to emphasize the Jr. because I don't want you to confuse with my son, who is Norman A. Carter III, who happens to be a very, very successful businessman. I idolize him. He really is doing a lot of great things in the world, and I do mean the world today. So again, remember with the some of the important things we talked about: resisting arrest, and running from the police officer and hiding from police officers can be considered resisting arrest. Remember that. Also, when stopped by a police officer, you are obligated to show them your driver's license, your vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. In some states, like Georgia, they can verify your insurance coverage as soon as they stop you. That's all in the system. But in some states, they're a little behind. They may not have that. But as a rule, wherever you go, you're obligated to show those things. And please don't get into the let's make a deal. You show me something and I'll show you this. No. Officer asks to see your driver's license, vehicle registration, and insurance registration. Show them. You're obligated to do that. Prevent a problem. Resisting that only creates a bigger issue for you, and you can go from making a routine traffic stop or a routine traffic violation stop into something that can lead to your being arrested. So we want to stay away from that. Also, remember, this is voting season. Here in Georgia, early voting has already started. Don't wait till the last minute. Here in Georgia, I believe March 24th is the primary date for the presidential election. If at all possible, you can early vote in your particular community. Please do that. Do not let your excuse be, oh, I got sick on the last day and I can't get there. No, that's weak. Oh, it rained and I didn't feel like coming out. That's weak. You have time to do it. You have time to get it done now. You had time to watch your soap operas, your boxing matches, your westerns. You go to the movies, go all that sort of stuff during the week. You know what? Take a little time to vote. Take a little time to vote. Remember, people have died. And I don't care whether you're white, black, Indian, Latino. People have died of every racial description so that you can vote. There are countries throughout this world who are envious of the fact that all Americans have the right to vote. So please, even in some states, I believe such as Florida, they're even making it possible for convicted felons to vote. And that's going to be a trend that's going to take over this entire country. Because convicted felons, you serve your time for the crime, you also should have a right to vote. That should not be held against you. There are other things that could be held against you, particularly if you've been guilty of something to do with fraudulent voting. But everybody needs to take an opportunity. Number one, make sure you're registered. Don't wait till the last day. Contact your voter registration board right now. Contact them. Get that resolved before March 24th here in Georgia, or whenever your presidential primary date is. You can get that resolved with just a phone call or checking online, however you might do that. You can resolve that. And also, the census will be coming out beginning towards the end of this week, from March 12th to March 20th. Participate. Be sure you fill out the census report. It is so important. So important. Political representation, hospitals in your neighborhood, funding for your schools, representation on school boards. All of these things are so important. They're not going to use the census to get some personal information on you that's not relevant to the census. They're not going to use it to come out and arrest you for something. So please feel free. And I would like to, in the beginning of the segment, I mentioned the recording by Billie Holiday, the late Billie Holiday, "Strange Fruit." You may be able to hear that on WCEG. It's going to be coming up real soon. I really want you to listen to this song. It's an emotional rendition of the song by Billie Holiday. It is heartfelt. And after her first presentation of the song to a live audience, Billie Holiday made sure she sang this song throughout her career. She never let it go. It's an important song, and I want you to remember that the strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees, among that strange fruit were people who just wanted to vote. So you need to vote. Thank you for listening to the WCEG Network. We appreciate you listening to Issues and Answers. This is Norman A. Carter Jr. on the WCEG Network. I wish you all a good day. Remember, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. Have a good evening.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the tree to drop. Here's a strange and bitter